Hi all. Let's talk a little bit about syntax. At this point, you should have read the chapter in Shirowalowski's The Art of Poetry that talks about syntax, but I want to go over a few things just as a way of clarifying or perhaps adding to what Wolowski has said. Syntax is really crucial to understanding poetry. One of the things to keep in mind with most poetry is that the basic unit of meaning is not the individual word, it is instead sentences. Sentences that have been divided up over a number of lines. And if we're going to understand the sentences in poetry, this requires us to go back to some of the the basics of English grammar, but also to remember how complex those basic rules can get. So if you remember back from high school or grade school or whenever, the basic structure of a sentence in English usually goes something like this. We begin with a subject, we then have a verb, and that can be followed by an object and sometimes an indirect object. A verb, as you should know, is action. I'm not even going to try to write this in with the little mouse thing here, but we've got action or a state of being. So it could be is, are, was, were. Subject is going to be a noun or a pronoun. The thing that is doing the action or the thing that is the thing that is being. So if I say he is tall, the verb is, and he is the pronoun that is being, who is. Let's look at a couple of very practical examples. The first sentence here, the boy smashed the plate with a hammer. We've got the boy is the subject. The verb is smashed. What did he smash? Well, he smashed the plate. So the plate is the direct object. And what did he do it with? He did it with a hammer. The hammer is the indirect object. One of the things about English as a language is that this can be rearranged quite a bit without really getting in the way of meaning. With a hammer, the boy smashed the plate. Same structure here. The boy is still the subject. Smashed is still the verb. Plate is still the direct object. Hammer is the indirect object. We can rearrange it a little bit more. The boy, with a hammer, smashed the plate. Same meaning. This one could be a little bit confusing because depending on how you read this or say this, the punctuation helps. But if you heard this spoken, the boy with the hammer smashed the plate. Well, with a hammer could be describing the boy, identifying which boy, the one with a hammer, or it could be what he smashed the plate with. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there. But nevertheless, the basic meaning can still be communicated. Well, let's take a look at this as it relates to poetry. This is the first line from Charmaine Cadot's poem, Sea Legs. Doesn't mean standing where the ocean once smacked dirt shells under your feet. If we look at this, we can identify the verb pretty easily. Doesn't mean. The question, though, is what is the subject? And this is one of the things that poets will often do. They will invite you as the reader to kind of fill in some of the missing details. This sentence doesn't actually have a subject, and we have to remember the title of the poem, Sea Legs. This would be much easier if I could do this on my tablet instead of on my PC, but nevertheless, you can put up with my very bad writing here. When we remember that the title of the poem is Sea Legs, now we can make this into a complete sentence. Sea legs doesn't mean standing where the ocean once smacked dirt shells under your feet. You have to fill that information in. So be on the lookout for sentences like that. So then what do we do with something like this? When you take hold of one, its heart flashes apricot and pops like the filament in a hot light bulb. I usually start by identifying the verbs. So one verb in this sentence is take hold. Another one is flashes. Another is pops. Then I'll go through and figure out, okay, so what is the subject? What is taking hold? Well, you. When you take hold of one. What is flashing and what is popping? Well, heart. So now we've identified a subject for each of these verbs. The next question for me is going to be, what is the main subject of the whole sentence? Well, one thing that you should remember about the English language is that there are certain places where the main subject and verb cannot be. One of those places is in an introductory phrase. So we look at this and we understand when you take hold of one, introduces the rest of the sentence. So we know that the main subject and verb cannot be here, so let's just draw a line through it. Its heart flashes apricot and pops like the filament in a hot light bulb. Well, the main subject is its, heart. Heart really is the main subject. The main verbs, it's a compound verb, there are two of them, flashes and pops. Well, now what do we do with the rest of the words? Well, apricot describes the flash. And like the filament in a hot light bulb, describes the popping. What kind of popping is it? So now we've kind of figured out the basic syntax and grammar of this particular line. We know the main subject, we know the main verb, we understand how the other parts of the sentence relate to it. Let's try this with one that's a little bit more complex. These are the first two stanzas of John Donne's poem, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, now his breath goes, and some say no. So let us melt, and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity of our love. So the first thing we have to do here is to identify where the sentences actually begin and end. And I would suggest to you that we can ignore this period. I think it goes with this word no, and we're intended to read from here all the way down to here as the first sentence. And then this is a second sentence that is joined to the first by a semicolon. So now we can go through and ask, what are the verbs? Well, one verb is pass, or pass away. Another is whisper. Another is this, do say. Another is say. All of these are actions. Let us melt is another verb. Make no noise. Actually, this should just be melt right here. Make is a verb. Move is a verb. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 verbs all in this one sentence. Our task is to figure out which one is the main one. Well, we can look at this right here. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go. This is all one long introductory phrase. So I'll just put an I here to remind us of that. While some of their sad friends do say, now his breath goes, and some say no. This is also part of this same introductory phrase. So this is all one long introductory phrase that leads us up to this. So let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. The main verb in this sentence, or the main verbs, are melt, make, and move. And the subject then becomes, this is what is called an imperative. It's an understood subject, we, indicated to us here by the word us. That gives us a clue. Let us melt, make no noise, nor tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. 3 verbs attached to this one subject, and all of this is an introduction to it. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go. So in the way that virtuous men die, pass away, and whisper to their souls to go, so tell their souls to leave their body, while some of their sad friends say, now his breath goes. So you can imagine the friends are watching this virtuous man pass away and saying, oh, he's dying, while others are saying, no, he's not. In this way, like this, let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. 'twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity of our love. So we find out only here that this poem is about two lovers. And the poet is saying, in the same way that virtuous men die quietly, let us melt and not make a lot of noise, no tear floods, etc. So we are going to part without giving in to all of the histrionics that we might expect. Instead, it's going to be like this virtuous man passing away quietly and peacefully. This is a complex poem. It takes a lot of work to figure this out. But if you don't go to the trouble to figure out what is the main verb, I could easily imagine that someone would say, oh, this is a poem about someone passing away, someone dying. Well, really, it's not. It's about two lovers who are parting from each other. We only get that by doing this work of figuring out the syntax. We'll spend a lot more time working on syntax in the work of John Donne. We'll do some of that in class. And you'll be writing just a little bit in preparation for that. But I did want to show you how, although syntax seems pretty simple, when we start getting into poetry, it can get a little bit complex. One question that I would have for you is to ask this. What difference does it make what order we get these things in? Would this be a different poem if John Donne had flipped it and begun with this? Let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods nor sigh tempests move, as virtuous men pass mildly away. Doesn't matter. We'll spend some time discussing that in class. A few final suggestions for you when thinking about syntax. Always identify the main subject and verb first. Pay attention to where the verb can't be. It can't be in introductory phrases, cannot be in prepositional phrases. Then, once you've identified the main subject and verb, you can start to figure out how the other phrases in the poem relate to the subject and verb. And finally, always, always, always ask why. Why might the poet have put things in this particular order? Why might the poet have created a syntax that does not follow our neat subject, verb, plus object? One of the key steps towards understanding any poem.